My guest this week is Tristin Hopper, columnist with the National Post, who joins me from Victoria, BC. His column, First Reading, is vital reading every day, especially during this federal election campaign. And he's the author of the new book. It's called Don't Be Canada, How One Country Did Everything Wrong All at Once. It's published by Sutherland House. It's darkly comic, but it's an accurate snapshot of Canada in the 2020s. Here we are in the middle of the 2020s. In a quote from the book, it says how one of the richest, most tolerant, and most functional countries on earth decided to take wealth, tolerance, and functionality for granted. It's about how the most educated nation on earth was convinced to go all out on unproven theories without considering the consequences. So, Tristin, welcome to the podcast. When did you get the idea to write this book, and what was the moment that made you do it? The moment that you said, "This is the book in a nutshell. This is the thesis, and I got to do it."
It was basically so. I've worked at the National Post since 2011, and one of the things I like to do is I'll just do regular sort of internet searches for how Canada is being mentioned in the international press. So I'll just search the word Canada, and you'll see, in the Indian press, in the English press, in the European press, how Canada is being mentioned. And when I first started in 2011, we really only were mentioned either for something cutesy, it would be like, adorable goose like Snuggles, or it would be, if we were ever mentioned in the context of policy, it was usually how another country could be like Canada. So, what's an ideal immigration system? Well, Canada is the most ideal immigration system. The points-based immigration system is beneficial for Canada. There's basically no sort of mainstream anti-immigrant movement in Canada because they've managed it so well. So there was a few areas in which, if you want to manage a debt crisis, the absolute best way to manage a debt crisis is how Canada did it in the 1990s. It's sort of the model for how others should do it. There's actually an article going around right now. It's a New York Times article from 2014 mentioning how Canada had the world's richest middle class. So, right in the sort of 2010s, you would have, I also remember from that era, you would have Canada was sort of held up as the so-called American dream was actually more the case here than it was in the United States. So just the idea of income mobility, if you worked hard, you could sort of, make a name for yourself. Just 10 or 15 years ago, the stats showed that was easier to do in Canada than the United States. So around 10 years ago, and it's not a partisan book, so you're not going to find the name Trudeau in this book all that often. But about 10 years ago, and particularly in the last 5, the way Canada was being mentioned internationally started to shift. We were frequently mentioned as a model of what not to do. And I'd never really seen that before. So I saw this in terms of euthanasia and medical assistance in dying. So you saw this when the UK was considering doing its own medical assistance in dying. This actually came up at committee. They said, well, whatever we do, if we do the Dutch system, if we do the Oregon system, we should really avoid what Canada has done. Canada has really screwed this up, gone way too far, overlooked a lot of problems with the system that we should best avoid. You also saw that in terms of drugs, harm reduction. Canada climbed second only to Scotland, just in terms of the raw overdose rate. We were number 1 in sort of, we were actually at the bottom of the list for the OECD in terms of hospital beds. We've, of course, been number 1 for housing unaffordability for years at this point. So it was just sort of an amalgamation of seeing all these instances just even mentioned in passing. There was actually, the Financial Times had a story where it was mentioned the breakdown nations. So previously powerful and influential nations that sort of lost their global standing. And they said Canada is just the prime example of this. It's a Financial Times story. So it was just noticing that the way people perceive us, even the way people joke about us abroad. So 10, 15 years ago, the standards, people who don't know much about Canada, maybe they'll have a joke about free healthcare. Maybe they'll have a joke about maple syrup. Now, the leading joke you're probably going to get is, are you really killing your elderly people? Or, if the medical system is, if you got a cold, they're going to, I'm not doing these jokes justice. But it sort of started from that point, that very quickly, Canada went from a nation that either nobody thought about, or we were seen as a place that was so well run you didn't have to think about it, to on a number of levels, and not just drugs, not just euthanasia, not just affordability, a whole bunch of things all at once, we became the worst example in the entire world. So it was my surprise at that which led to the book.